Okay, we are live. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome, Katie, to the channel for an Indie Author live chat. How are you?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
Doing good. I'm so excited to have met you just through the Facebook group and then now live face to face. For those who are joining us who have not heard of Katie, Katie is a fantasy writer who also works on resources for people who want to write and is also an SFWA member. And I'm super excited. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what kind of fantasy you write?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Cady Hammer. I'm currently a first year graduate student at the University of Houston, and I'm a young adult fantasy author. Writing books was something that I wanted to do pretty much my entire life. I think I started writing my first sort of novella length book when I was like 11 years old. I was in fifth grade. Now that project will never see the light of day, but it was kind of the first thing that really pushed me to find where my creative voice was. I experimented with a lot of different genres, kind of from middle school on until finally settling on young adult fantasy, kind of at the end of my senior year of high school and beginning of my freshman year of college. I decided to tackle National Novel Writing Month the November of my first semester of college, which was a great plan, by the way. It's definitely a good idea to stack all of these things together: first semester of college, first
Hmm.
book, writing all the way through. And but it was a fantastic experience. I think that the pacing of National Novel Writing Month, you don't have a lot of time to go back and kind of self-edit, and that really helped me by setting that timeline to actually get through an entire idea all the way through. I published
Wow.
how Chasing Faye came to be. I wrote that book during my freshman year of college and published that in August of 2020 with a small press, New Degree Press in Washington D.C. And then I became an indie author from there and just started writing. And I'm up to 5 books. It's been, I guess, two and a half years since Chasing Faye came out, and I've written two full length and then two shorter stories, and more to come.
So the takeaway is writing books is like eating a bag of chips. You can't just stop at one.
No, you can't. And it's crazy because I really thought the Chasing Faye trilogy, I really did think that that was kind of going to be my one and done sort of idea. That this was the idea I was going to take to completion, and then that was it, because I couldn't come up with any more. But
Mhm.
finishing that first book unlocked an entire part of my brain that I had never, and now there's like dozens. I have dozens of
Mhm.
ideas written down in my little subsequent book ideas folder on my Google Drive. That's just, there's a lot more to come for me for sure.
So, spoilers, everybody. That means you should go follow Katie to follow all the things that are coming. And Katie's links and the links to her books are in the description box for people who are watching on YouTube. And the Twitter viewers, you guys are going to have to either find Katie's social or hop over to YouTube to grab the links. Um, but you've got some really impressive stories with some amazing twists on fantasy. Chasing Faye is not your typical girl in a Fae world romance fantasy at all. It's an adventure with a strong female main character and family ties that really kick off the whole story. Was
Absolutely.
it daunting? You said you went with a small press. Was it daunting querying something that didn't fit that sort of box?
It was really interesting. The whole process of that was super interesting because originally I was headed for, big traditional publishing at first. And I knew the story was strong, but it was different. It was different from things that I had read. I like in my stories, I like to take all these different tropes and ideas that I love from my own reading and kind of mash them together into something that I would devour myself if I saw it on a bookshelf.
Mhm.
And it was daunting at first. Querying is such a difficult process, and the waiting is a lot. And because you're always just the anxiety of wondering, will you hear back? Are you ever going to hear back? Because sometimes, you won't hear back from places. If you wait, 6 months and you don't hear back, that's usually a no, and that kind of thing. It was actually a complete twist of fate that I ended up with New Degree Press. I was actually working, I saw a flyer for this kind of college age hybrid nonfiction book program through New Degree Press.
Mm.
I just happened to be at the cafeteria that day when I saw the flyer. I signed up, started working on a nonfiction project, and then when they found out about my fiction project, they became interested, and I pitched it to them, and they're like, "Do you want to publish this?" And I said, "Absolutely." And it was a complete, it was one of those moments where right place, right time to be, to meet the right people. And so yeah, it was one of the craziest experiences I've ever been through.
Wow. So, as part of that, you said you were going for the big traditional. Were you doing that query agent process?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was. I did that for probably almost a year, because I believe I started querying with that. I finished the first draft in November of 2018. Started querying probably July of 2019 after I'd done several revisions on it, because it was important for me to have it be in its absolute best quality before I started pitching that. And I pitched a lot. I pitched for about a year. I had a couple of full requests, but nothing came of that. And
Mm.
but through the New Degree Press experience, learning how to do, one of the things I really liked about my experience with them is they really walk you through the publishing process in a very detailed way. You really get to see a very intimate look at all the processes,
Mm.
and finding out that I could produce that as an indie author kind of for around the same price, or a cheaper price depending on who I was using. I realized I could take full creative control of the process. Though I will say I did have a lot of creative control at New Degree Press over my story, but the indie author, just being involved in all the little aspects of what the cover is going to look like, how to market, just the formatting. Like, there's so much involved in being an indie author, but I
Yeah.
really love it.
So, for the Ivy Labyrinth, which I'm guessing is your indie novel because
That's
it
one of my, yes,
started as a Kindle Vella.
yes.
Um, I think Kindle Vella is a newer concept, and I know it's more US specific. But what made you decide to go that route for it?
Well, I was one of the first. I was in kind of the first round of emails from Amazon
Wow.
when they started opening it up to when they started announcing it. I remember that that first round of KDP authors getting those emails, not the specific ones of like being targeted to be asked, but that's the second first round of where they're opening it up to everyone and announcing they're going to go into the serial fiction direction. I knew that serial fiction was something that was quite popular, particularly internationally.
Mhm.
Particularly in Asia, there's a really large serial fiction audience there,
Mhm.
and just across various countries in Asia. And I knew that this was a kind of would be a new experience to kind of dip my toe into and see if it was something that I would like. And I happened to have this one project from that I started in high school that I abandoned, a like a long time ago. But I realized that if I aged that particular project up and split it out into the four perspectives that Ivy Labyrinth is written from, it
Mhm.
actually lent itself to be a fantastic serial fiction concept.
Mhm.
So I pulled my old notebooks out of the desk drawer. I had to reboot my super old iPad to pull some of the old writing I had off of that, and kind of redo kind of the main story, and kind of scale up the characters, because I believe it was originally like a kind of upper middle grade low YA, kind of now scaled more to kind of an upper YA story.
Mhm.
And it was a super cool experience, because serial fiction writing is unlike any other type of writing. There's a very specific manner of making sure you're hitting the episodes are long enough to give readers something to kind of dig into, but you want to have those cliffhangers at the end to keep them coming back for more. And it's been Kindle is definitely a learning curve, and has been and continues to be, as we're rounding, I guess we're about a year and a half into Kindle, but it really has been a pretty cool experience overall.
So, when you decided to adapt it to the first novel in the series, did you keep it pretty much the same, or did
I
you
did.
redo?
I did. I took volume one is the first 21 episodes of the Kindle project, and it's almost the only thing that it's missing is the author's notes at the end. I kept it
Mm.
in its original form because, one, I think that's most true to the story. I don't and personally, I didn't like the idea of kind of doing a harder edit on that for the book world. I think it was more important for people to see the raw story. And for this
Mhm.
particular series, most of the time I would go, the whole professional editor route. This one felt like it needed to be identical to what my science fiction readers were reading. And I put it into these volumes because I wanted to catch the people who weren't into Kindle yet, but were into the book side. There are people who wanted to read that story, but who either, didn't want to be on the serial fiction platform, couldn't figure out the serial fiction platform. And in fact, when I did release volume one, I did see a couple of people migrate from volume one to follow along with the Kindle kind of as it was going along. Because I saw episode 22, numbers were higher than episode 21. So I knew some people had migrated over from book one, which was super exciting.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
And then I guess it sort of works in reverse, sort of like what we've seen with Lore Olympus coming out in print. You've got the print version of the Ivy Labyrinth, so people who started out reading it, who want to keep it forever, can buy the paperback.
Exactly.
It's really, really cheap right now, too. If you're in the US and you're watching, it's under $6 US, so you can get it for a great deal. Probably cheaper than you can read the Kindle.
I tried to match the prices pretty well for I did try to match the prices pretty well for how much you would be spending on average tokens versus how much you'd be spending with the book. I think the book is slightly more because I think you're paying for the convenience of having it all together at the same time. But I tried to keep them as even as possible because I wanted to cater to both reader bases.
Yeah, yeah. So something interesting that I noticed about your writing is both in Chasing Faye and then with Christy in the Ivy Labyrinth, they are not necessarily the magical ones in the story. I love that Christy is a mortal in a magical world instead of the one magical person in a mortal world. It's so creative. What inspired those characters?
So Grace and Christy, particularly in these, the first volume and first book, are what I consider to be introverted leaders. They're those people who they're intelligent, but they're quiet. They kind of stay in the background. But when the opportunity arises, they kind of step forward and emerge into their own kind of over the development of the stories. And so that was a really important factor for me to include because I see a lot of myself, particularly in Christy. I went to a private K through 12 school in my childhood, and something that was heavily emphasized, particularly in my high school, was leadership. But the leadership that you would see, particularly emerging from the student body, was primarily extroverted, very personal, very open with people. And it wasn't until I really hit college where I realized that like there are different styles of leadership, and introverted leaders actually do have a very very specific leadership style that can lend themselves well to all kinds of industries in a very different way than I think extroverted leaders are. So I wanted to show that characterization in these young characters because I don't think enough introverts and introverted readers get to see themselves in that guise stepping into those leadership roles.
Yes, I completely agree as a fellow introvert. Absolutely. And with Chasing Faye, the main character is going to try to find what happened to her brother. And there's a strong family dynamic in that story. She wants to provide for her family. It's one of her driving values, and then everything with her brother. Does that stem from personal relationships you have with your family?
I would say there's a little bit there. One of the things that I really like about Grace's motivation here is that she grew up very close to her brother. Her brother was both her, her family member, but also her best friend. Mm-hmm. And I definitely bring that from my younger sister. Her and I were super close. Are super close. And I mean, we grew up, doing everything together, building story ideas, doing, little doll plays together as we kind of developing the story over time. She is an integral portion to my writing process. Actually, she does a lot of beta reading for pretty much all of my stories. And I get both the kind of the hard, there's a massive plot hole here perspective, but then I also get the little comments that are, yay, the ship is a ship. When the characters finally get together. And so I definitely think the relationship between Leo and Grace derives from my sister and my really close relationship.
Oh, and you go into Fae territory to save her.
Absolutely.
Oh goodness. How did you get into just educating other writers? I know that's a part of your writing journey as well.
Absolutely. So I started my blog, Fluff About Fantasy, in I believe January of 2019. And that was immediately after I had just, finished that first draft of Chasing Fae.
Mhm.
And I realized that in the process of kind of getting prepared for this draft and then actually doing the drafting, I was doing a ton of research
Mm.
about fantasy writing, about the process, about world building, character building, all this kind of stuff. And then eventually getting into, looking at the revision process. And I realized that for young writers or starting out writers who really have a great idea but have no idea where to start, the information out there was not compiled into a single database. I mean, I
Yeah.
did research across hundreds, and I do mean hundreds of sites, hundreds of
Yeah.
articles, and for somebody who's very research oriented like me, that's totally fine. But for other people, I felt like you could very easily get bogged down in
Mhm.
and end up not writing that story because you'd have no idea where to begin. So Fluff About Fantasy emerged as a resource to kind of take all of that information and simplify it to kind of a younger, starting out writer voice, and I filter it through through my own writing experience to really just get people the basic steps to do your world building, get your characters set up, several methods of doing that, start the drafting process, not get bogged down in that first draft process, because I would say, in my personal opinion, the first draft, and particularly the first draft of the first book, is the hardest that you will do
Mhm.
as an author, as a writer. And then once I started branching out to the revision process, just getting through there as well was difficult. There are not a lot of resources out there of like, let's go step by step with how to revise fiction. There's like
Mhm.
one that I know I found one or two specific guides, and I believe those both of those are linked on my various posts. It's I did a lot of posts the first couple of years. Now it's a little bit more like once every quarter. I hope to kind of return and keep giving those resources as I find them, particularly about different subgenres that I'll be experimenting in, down the line. Because I think
Mhm.
it's really important to me to help those people who maybe not have found their voice yet, but are like at the cusp of being about to, can get there. And I think by simplifying the research process, I think that's a really good bridge to get people there.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I dropped the link to Katie's Fluff About Fantasy site here for the writers who are watching, or readers who thought about writing but thought it might have been impossible. The writing is actually the easier part. It's all the other stuff and making it published that I feel like is so overwhelming.
It's definitely a lot. There's so many factors into just the publication of one book.
Mhm.
But it is, although it's a lot of hours, it's very rewarding.
Yeah. And I say that now that I've said that, and I hear myself say that out loud too. If you are somebody who struggles with the actual writing, that's okay. And I think that's normal for a lot of us. I personally, like Katie, really didn't push myself to write until NaNoWriMo, the first time I did NaNoWriMo, and was just hooked. And here I've been ever since. And I tell people if it doesn't happen during NaNoWriMo, it won't get written because I don't have much time the rest of the year. But in November, sure. So do whatever you got to do to make the time to write. Um, really is the most important step there. Um, let's see. Does your small press mind that you are also indie publishing?
No, actually, was down for the one book with them, and then when I branched out to indie, they still work with me on a few things. When I needed to reformat Chasing Fae to include my newsletter subscriber link at the end, they took care of that. They helped take care of that for me. I occasionally pop by for various events. I've done a few interviews with them, particularly when they were launching kind of their Kindle Vella introduction program. I did an interview about my experience with Kindle Vella, and I still talk to a bunch of the authors there, still do collaborations every once in a while. So I have a pretty good relationship still with them, for sure.
That's awesome. That's great to know. We've got some other questions about the writing. I don't want to get too technical into the publishing process here, but you can reach out to Cady, look through the blog, because I know some of these posts, as I scrolled through Fluff and Fantasy, I've seen on that website, so you might see some answers there.
And
Uh,
anyone who wants to reach out to me after the live, I have a message form on my website, kadyhammer.com, or you can message me via social media. I try to answer everything that I receive.
yes. So reach out there. We will cover a couple here. If you're on YouTube and want to leave a question, I can pull it up on the video. Twitter people, I've got you here. But really, I think there's just a lot of new writers that are watching the streams in January of this year, which is great. Welcome to the writing world, everybody. A couple of these, I know I can answer yes, you have to have a completed manuscript, hopefully, before you query.
100%. You want your querying manuscript in the best possible condition before you start pitching.
Yes. Oh, this is a good one. What's the difference between a small press, a traditional big press, and a indie publishing?
Okay, all right. Let's see if I can get a decent breakdown of this. Traditional publishing is primarily the big five, but you do have some small presses who act like traditional publishers. And essentially, what you'll see is you're going to have usually minimal creative control of the process. You're probably not going to be able to have as much input into your cover. The story is definitely yours and definitely goes forward as yours, but then you'll be working with, specific editors who are going to help you shape that. There may be things the traditional publisher wants to bring in, and it's kind of an ongoing conversation, but I do think the traditional publisher definitely takes the lead on certain things on the production side, on the cover design, on the marketing side as well. Though I will say, regardless of what you go with, marketing is your responsibility pretty much 99.9% of the time. So you
Yeah.
definitely want to have some familiarity with basic book marketing. When it comes to small presses, some small presses act like traditional press, some require, and then some are like New Degree Press, which is hybrid, where you are taking a part in the investment into that. Now, the way New Degree Press did it was with a pre-sale campaign on Indiegogo, and I have done pre-sale campaigns as an indie author as well for all of my books, and they've always gone really well. You do need to know how to do them, and now that I think about it, I don't think that's a post I've covered on my Fluff About Fantasy. That might be one I need to do
Oh,
for folks. And something like a hybrid press, you want to be very careful that you're not branching into vanity press. Vanity press, you are paying, you're paying 100%, and most of the time, they're taking a larger percentage of the royalties. There's a very specific deal with New Degree Press in terms of I retained all my copyright, the royalties. It's the upfront stuff that I was supplying for, and I wasn't paying that out of my pocket. I was doing that via the pre-sale stuff. So it's a kind of that theirs is definitely a different kind of model than most of the ones I've seen. So I got very lucky there. But you have to be careful when you're going for that you don't get involved with vanity press. And then indie authorship, you have full creative control over absolutely everything. You're the one going out and finding your editors, your cover designers, your formatters. I actually use Reedsy Book Editor to do all my formatting.
oh,
It's still free and it works fantastically well. It's super quick to do. But you're going out and finding all those things, and you're responsible for kind of all those production stages. You're going out and finding contractors and everything, but you also retain full creative control, and in 99% of the scenarios, full royalties as well. So if you're doing your like audiobooks, maybe if you're doing like a royalty share with your narrator or something like that, then that's different. But and you're really involved in kind of every level. You're the author,
yeah.
you're the producer, you're also the business face as well. So I realized during my work with New Degree Press and how much creative control they offered me there, that I really liked having control over that stuff. And that's kind of how I branched out into indie, because I found that I could do it for a little cheaper myself and with people that I've worked with kind of over the last couple of years. And I love being involved in all this. I'm a planner at heart, so that's kind of my
Oh,
wheelhouse. So I think that's the best explanation I can give for kind of the different types of publishing. Hopefully that helps.
it's super helpful. And it ties into the next one, which is, do you offer coaching or mentoring?
I don't, but if you want to reach out and like talk about it with me, I'd love. One of the things I've always wanted to do is if help authors through that process. I've never thought about, that's the first time anyone's ever suggested to me that I would like maybe be good at that, like that. So I thank you to whoever that was, because that's a huge confidence boost for me. But I mean, if people have questions or want a closer eye, I reach out and we can see what we can put together. It's definitely something I'm interested in. That's kind of why I started Fluff About Fantasy, is because I had hoped that people would connect with not just the kind of the material, but also just that desire of being an author and just needing that extra little push. I'm good at the extra. That extra push is, I think,
Yeah,
it makes all the difference.
that's awesome. So yes, reach out. Um, checking phone and screen.
That's totally fine. It's,
uh, so speaking of, getting to work with you, how about meeting you? Are you doing any live events or signings this year?
I am not sure yet. I definitely want to try to put together some local signings. That's definitely in my in Texas, and it's definitely in my on my list of things I'd like to do. I don't do live events very often, but I can definitely put something together if people are interested. Believe it or not, I am not the best on camera, and it comes
You're
as a
doing
surprise. But like,
great.
I everybody says that. Everyone's like, like, what do you mean? You're totally fine on camera. I'm like, no, underneath this is just a bundle of anxiety. So I don't do a lot of face to face like live conversations. This is probably the best one with questions that have come in. So I may need to put something together for that. So I don't have any concrete plans, but I have aspirations of things that I would like to do this year. This year I think it's a pivotal year for me as an author. So there's a lot of content coming out, and hopefully a lot of conversations being had as well.
Yes, yes. The best way you can really support an indie author, if you're watching as a reader or a fellow writer who wants to meet these people in person, is support their books. Give them the means to travel to where you are. See if a local con wants to offer them a guest appearance. Little things like that are things that readers can do on our behalf, and it means a lot too. So, but yeah, this has been amazing. You've done so great for someone who doesn't like being on
I so appreciate it. Thank you.
camera. So, what's coming next in your book world for 2023?
Oh, we've got a lot on the schedule. The one thing that I can confirm right now is that Ivy Labyrinth Volume 2 is coming out in March, mid March. I'm just finishing up the
Yay!
last couple of episodes for that compilation. The cover is ready to go. I am waiting on a couple final tweaks so I can do a cover reveal hopefully mid February. Also, Ivy Labyrinth Volume 1 is going to be discounted pretty soon because that book just won. Just placed in the top 10 of Read Freely's 25 best indie books of 2022. So that'll be,
Congrats!
I just got the book award cover overlay for that. So my cover designer is working on that. And as soon as that's up, I'm going to be running a sale on both the ebook and the paperback for that one. And then I've got a couple of projects scheduled for later. There should be a volume 3 at some point later this year for Ivy Labyrinth. Also, I have a Chasing Faye prequel in the works, and then a brand new fairy tale retelling series, hopefully launching in sort of mid-December. We'll
Oh,
see. We'll see.
nice.
That's kind of the tentative plan. We'll see how it all pans out as we're at the beginning of the year, beginning of the graduate semester. Things evolve as they evolve, but that's currently my plan.
Well, awesome. Very excited. Follow Cady. You can check out the link to the books that are already out in the description box again and start reading some of those, or the Kindle Vella if you're a Kindle Vella reader.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
It's such a pleasure. And if you're watching as a fellow writer, this Saturday, February 4th, we will be bringing on a panel of professional editors, author editors, and self editors to talk about editing options you have if you're going the indie route for your book. And we also have 4 more indie author live chats / live reads over the weekend. So subscribe if you'd like a notification when we go live for those. Thank you so much, Cady. Have a great
Thank
week.
you. You as well.